that the law has been continuously used as a tool of restriction, but it has also been a tool of liberation. I begin from that place because it's important that we analyze what the law has been equipped to do. It's important that we understand that because the law, when something is not in a law, you don't even have a basis of law being, that you're not recognized as perhaps an individual that is worth protection. That's the first thing I wanted to know. The second one is that today I do hope that my panelists and all of us, as we reflect on legal frameworks and dignity and inclusion of all of us, to reflect on beyond the text in the law. Currently in Uganda, I think that sovereignty bill was, it was passed. And for anyone that interacted with that very small piece of text, you saw why every word that makes its way to a bill is extremely important. That while sovereignty of the Ugandan people is extremely important, we also know that that law is being used to restrict so many groups that benefit from foreign direct investments, and the NGOs are one of those. So I just wanted us to also come from that place. And then thirdly, I wanted us to also recognize something that I know for the longest time a lot of the people in this room or even my panelists have interfaced with. That's one, the contradiction of legal frameworks, right? The fact that we have our constitutions in the different countries that do protect our dignity, that speaks about equity, that speaks about equality, but also along the way, as governments continue to hold on to power, they are utilizing the law to squeeze certain individuals out of that protection, to squeeze certain individuals out of the ambit of what the law is able to help you get out of. You're welcome, my panelists, and I'll quickly get into question one, which speaks about laws. When laws reflect popular prejudice, right, from the areas where you work, and not justice, what strategies remain there for advancing human rights? I'm speaking about this because I know sometimes we run to lawyers to say, fight for us, let's go to court. When the Ahab Act was passed in Uganda, lawyers were up in arms, running around to say, this thing is illegal, there's no quorum, we cannot continue with it. But in areas where we see that the law, which lawyers like yourselves use to then work with the faith leaders, the journalists, to be able to push for protection, if a lot of this law is being developed with prejudice against those groups, what are the options available for people?
So I thought that one of the things that a person that we could think of is the people. The laws always affect the people, they reflect what the people want, and we can always hope that people will not give up on the fight. We can rely on human resilience, that humans will always find a way, will always fight back, we can rely on hope, but also we can also hope that there are collective rights that affect, that where human rights laws are made in such a way that they are restricting everything and everyone is being affected, everyone is being restricted, we can maybe hope that collective rights will bring people up to do something, to fight, so I also noticed that in recent times we have been consistently disappointed by the courts, because you see, as lawyers, our first resort is always the court. When someone comes to me, when they are telling me their story, in my mind I'm trying to pick out what can I go to court with, what can I do about this in the context of the law. Now, if I know in my mind that, okay, even if this is really bad, this is horrible, but the law is not on your side, then what do we do? When I know that courts will not come to my rescue, because we have constantly been disappointed in recent years. We have seen the AHA, we have seen the abortion petition, and so many other. These days, every time you try to go to court, there is some sort of disappointment. So I would think that right now, one of the strategies I would really hope to rely on is the people themselves. That the people will, at some point, and they will not give up, they will rise up and they will always demand this justice. And also that we can create awareness and make sure that every single person understands that whenever there is restriction, it affects all of us. That laws do not, restrictive laws do not affect one group of people, but it always spills over to also many other groups, and make sure that everyone else also realizes that it's their responsibility to do something to ensure that we all advance human rights in East Africa.
It becomes very extremely important that in the work that we do with religious leaders, with activists, that we are building consciousness. I think it's called popular education. It's called popular education. To raise consciousness for people to be concerned about the things that affect us as human beings. For me to be concerned that while I'm not a doctor, if there's this particular law that affects doctors and they're not able to do their work, it also affects me because I am one of, I enjoy the services of doctors and the work that we do. Right now, you see a lot of people that were fighting the sovereignty bill. We're speaking about foreign influence, that there's lots of foreigners that are funding homosexuality, political partyism, and etc. and etc. And you can clearly see when you read the bill that it's touching particular people, but it's been written in such a broad sense to be able to cover all the loose ends when it comes to be implemented. So thank you very much for raising the issue of the people. It means we have to go back to the people. So maybe let me hear from my sister from Kenya.
Thank you so much, Amy. I agree with my panelist here about collective action. There's a need for us to not look at certain laws as only applying to a selected group of people, because these laws come for all of us. The moment like for example, Kenya's Family Protection Bill says a landlord cannot lease their house to a queer person, a gay person. What does that mean to the economy? Yeah, it talks about something about citizen arrest. It means that you as an individual, you have the duty to frog match that person you think is gay to the police station, failure to which you can also be arrested. So it puts us all in a very dangerous space, and that's why there's a need for collective action to collectively condemn these laws, to collectively condemn these bills. But again, on the brighter side, I think as a country, Kenya, we have a beautiful constitution. Chapter 4 of our constitution speaks about the Bill of Rights. The language there is extremely lovely. Every person has a right to equality and non-discrimination. Every person, every person, every person. There's no way it says a person who's bald like Lulu cannot just walk anywhere, or a person who loves a woman as a woman cannot do a certain thing. So there's already existing laws that protect all of us, but then what we've seen is an increased organizing of backlash. We've seen laws like the Family Protection Bill, the AHA, the law in Ghana, Tanzania, like Senegal. Anti-LGBT and anti-rights are organizing to make sure that these laws are now taken over with these proposed family protection bills and these other laws. So there's a need to continue to implement a human rights-based approach. In everything we do, there's a need to continue looking at the humanity. Do no harm is also very, very important. How do I make sure that I'm not harming my neighbor? How do I make sure that I'm not harming the person who's coming to my church? Yeah. How do I make sure that the person who's coming to the mosque is not being harmed just because the law says something else? I think when I talk about the law, another thing is the way we selectively read the law. Yeah. So you're going to pick the point where it says, for example, Kenya's Penal Code criminalizes consensual same-sex conduct and terms it as unnatural. So it's left to whoever to decide what is unnatural. Maybe today I may wake up and say, if you touch my head, that's unnatural. Yeah. So it's quite open. It's very, very vague. But then we see people pick laws selectively. But when we reflect on the principles of human rights, I'll just name them. One of the things is human rights are indivisible, interdependent. You cannot tell me I have the right to equality and non-discrimination, but on the other hand, you're telling me I do not have the right to love a certain type of person. So it's very important that we read these laws and interpret them as a whole and not just cherry pick them. Yeah, I'm not an expert on religion or theology, but I would want to assume my colleague, and I'll point to Adera, who I'm very familiar with, would also say that I need to read the Bible collectively or the Quran collectively, and not just talk about where it says harm a specific type of person, but then also talk about loving everyone and the fact that God or Allah loves everyone and welcomes everyone. So I feel like there's a need to do that, and also to look at our intersecting identities. I'm a woman, I'm black. I think even by virtue of being Kenyan, there's already a problem there. Yeah, I'm Kenyan, I'm young. There's a lot of things that could affect the way I live my life as a woman. So yeah, I think those and strategic litigation, which I think we would speak about in another question. That we've seen strategic litigation work in other ways where the courts have not worked. The courts have worked in other instances, especially in Kenya. Strategic litigation has been a way to challenge the laws and to make sure that queer persons and even other broader human rights issues are well addressed. Even as we go file these court cases, not only Legal Health is there, but all of us collectively support even people who champion for these issues. And again, it's very costly and takes time. And we've seen what's happening with the funding situation. Just to mention quickly, we've also won on banning forced anal testing on presumed gay, bisexual, and men who have sex with men in Kenya, which was quite a win. I know some countries still struggle with that. And we're litigating on the right to education for LGBTQ plus learners, because right to education is something that everyone should have in the world. It's a universal right. So we are also litigating on that, and also to decriminalize consensual same-sex conduct in Kenya.
Maybe to our next question around, again, the legal framework, the current legal framework. These current legal approaches, do you feel that they are challenging injustice in the East African region, or we are simply, managing within acceptable limits? And why I ask is because there is just so much dwindling civic space, and it's going to continue to go down. We were filing last year to get a renewal of our permit, and we are a 50-year-old institution, and we were struggling. And then in my head I was thinking, how about the newer, younger people institutions, queer institutions that are organizing across the spectrum? What happens to institutions like those that may not even have Gamba? No, here we have a saying of, I know somebody, a big person somewhere who you can call to smoothen the process for you. That's not there for some younger institutions. So what happens to them? It means by extension, they are stopping us from organizing. So how do we attack that? So maybe if you could respond to that, I'll begin with my sister here. And if you feel the current legal approaches, are we just simply fitting within what's accepted, or we are really challenging the status quo through legal approaches?
I think in some instances where it suits us, we do manage within what we have. And then in some instances, we go all out. We try our best. We do press conferences. We make sure that we go to court and popularize what we are doing. There are cases we file, and for example, especially strategic litigation, and the strategy is, please don't say anything. Don't publicize, don't call journalists, don't do anything, because you don't want to maybe jinx the outcome. You don't want maybe the opposition to come in and find out that, hey, people are trying to fight for this kind of rights. People are trying to get somewhere in this space. So I think we are trying on both sides. We are strategizing basically. You look at what you can do and you see, okay, for this particular kind of case, do we publicize? Do we let go? Do we keep it down? Do we go to court, or do we find someone else outside the system to talk to? So it has been. I don't know if that challenges injustice, because it is unjust in itself. We should be in a space where people are free to talk about human rights, to fight for human rights, to freely talk about anything which affects the human being. But the response of the courts and the response of the state sometimes put us in a situation where we have to, look at this, strategize and look at our situation and say, for this one, let us go this way. For this one, let us go this way.
There are times whereby the law has really challenged these injustices. I've said it's one of our tools we use for advocacy. We try to change the laws through the courts. We've won some cases. I think 2 months ago, we were able to sentence 2 blackmailers who primarily target queer persons on dating apps to 15 years. That's a huge win, as much as those cases took long, but we were able to get that. But then I think the important thing is to see, how do we win within and beyond courts? We've been able to get really beautiful decisions from senior courts in Kenya, or like even other lower courts. But then there's still a lot of backlash, especially the moment you put it out there. And like my colleague was speaking, I was just like, we live the same lives, but just differently. Because the days we call it strategic silence. You're just like, we don't want anyone to know that these cases are coming up for hearing. Because the moment it's publicized, then it's completely turned into something else. People are speaking about different things, aspects of marriage equality, and again, it's just backlash. There's a lot of backlash. So there's a need to really think through advocacy on how do we win, just not only in court but beyond court, because we can get all these beautiful decisions on paper, the constitution can be very good, but if the society at large, if institutions that are supposed to protect everyone are not really respectful of this, then it doesn't really make any sense. But then I think it also goes into a thing of accountability. Yeah, how does the law hold? For example, people who introduce these harmful bills to our countries, how do we hold them accountable? Yeah, there's a need for accountability. Then there's a need for deterrence. I think deterrence is a very good thing in law. But the moment someone sees, if I say such a thing, then a thing like this would happen to me, then it might deter another person from doing a similar thing. So we need to rethink about that. And again, interpretation of the law. People cherry pick what they want to say. Like I said on our decision on the Supreme Court, as much as it was on freedom of association or registering an organization, the majority picked and said that it was on marriage equality and ran with it. And in turn, that caused a lot of harm. So interpretation is also a thing. But to answer your question, I would say it's a double-edged sword. In Kenya, I would give it a 60-40%.
You know, many times we believe that these judicial officers are like some gods of sorts, that, you know, they have to be presented with evidence, that they are understanding, that they are always impartial. But we must remember that at the back, that these are human beings to start with. That just like sometimes you hear a story in your house and then you start to judge and say, you know, I don't think this man did it. They also have those thoughts because they are human beings. And many times when there is pressure from the public for them to make a certain decision, they are usually somewhat pushed to actually make certain decisions because they also don't want the backlash. Then secondly, because, you know, like that decisions that you're talking about, I know that sexual minorities here in Uganda has been struggling to register. And that would have been a very good case for us to form an example that it's actually not about the people in the organization. It's about their freedom to associate, to form and register these organizations. But you can see the backlash that came with that. I remember seeing a lot on Twitter of people saying, you know, these gay people, they are pushing the things in court right now. You know, they have to register them. It means they are going to recruit in our schools and etc. So I hear you when you say it's a double-edged sword, but also the fact that there is bias from judicial officers themselves. When there is a lot of heat on something, when there is a lot of heat on a particular law, they also get biased. And because their biases, conscious or unconscious, are caused by their faith, their histories, their culture. At the end of the day, if someone comes from a place where queer people are unheard of, you will see it in their decision. And so to my last question to my speakers, what would it take for that intersection, that relationship between faith, the law, because really faith is within the people, communities, how do we link for them to make sense to the people we're speaking to? Is it possible for someone to still be a person who's a Christian, a Muslim, but also be able to understand that the dignity of other people that are not like you is as important to them as it is to you? Do you see us getting to that place where there's a relationship between, you know, the law, faith, I like, you know, faith or religion, depending on what you look at it, and then communities? Do you see that we can get to that place?
I think one of the major problems is the fact that someone might think there's no way these three things can coexist. So that's already a problem. We already have a barrier. We feel like, oh my God, there's no way I was going to be in this room and there's a sheikh, there's a pastor, or there's, you know, we already think, how are we going to be there? Yeah. Yesterday at dinner, I asked Obwanda, who is our convener from Kenya, we were like, so, and Adera also asked, so the people we are meeting in the room, are they movable middle or are they on the extreme? And that's important, because you have to prepare how I was going to speak to a sheikh or a faith-based leader who's already aware of this, as opposed to someone who, the moment they see my name or I introduce myself, they are not going to listen to anything I say. So I think such convenings are really, really important. Number one, they're not strange concepts. I like something that the previous panelist said, is that when you should not look at difference as being dangerous, and that's the thing we think about, that difference is dangerous. But then I think it's important to highlight how for the longest and for like queer communities, faith has been used as a tool of violence. There's conversion practices that happens in churches, that happens in mosques, amongst other areas. And that means that by the time you're telling a queer person that, you know, you can actually come to church, or like Reverend Adera will welcome you, they're just like, oh, Reverend Adera is going to tell me to change, and that's going to harm who I am. So it's important to actually have these convenings, talk about this. But then also knowledge is lacking, you know. There are people who say, I've never seen a queer person in my life. So to some people, it's a concept that does not exist. So I think it's important for us to continue having these convenings, to read the law as a whole, not pick certain aspects of the law. And this is what you tell people, that, you know, even the law says this. But the law also speaks about equality and non-discrimination, as much as the faith-based teachings speak about love and not only violence. How do we collectively read this and encourage people to do this? I think one thing I respect about faith-based leaders is the power that faith-based leaders yield in society. Someone will tell you, if you were to go randomly and ask someone, what do you think of homosexuality? They'll tell you, I think it's a crime or it's a terrible thing. And you ask them, what's your basis? My pastor said, or the sheikh said. Exactly. But what if the pastor, the faith-based leader said, actually you should love everyone, you know? So that's the power that faith-based leaders yield in the society. And I think it would be more important for us to preach equality and non-discrimination, but also to really align on the principles of human rights. Let us think of these things as a do no harm principle, and the law, faith, gender, all those things can coexist. What someone says in church will affect how a woman is treated in her house. You know, when in church or at the mosque they're talking about, oh, women should be a type of, should not do this or say that, then that affects, and even you can see cases of femicide or other forms of violence that people face in the society. So I think it's important for us to talk about these things. It's important to ask questions, and let us not treat different people as dangerous. Yeah. I think when most people walk into, they're like, oh, a queer person, what do you expect? Do you expect to see someone with a peculiar thing on their body? We are all human, you know? So let us embrace our humanity and also embrace our differences. We can all coexist.
So how do we recognize, one, our differences? Two, how do we celebrate them rather than letting them divide us?
Difference is not necessarily dangerous. Just because I'm different doesn't mean that all of a sudden I'm a bad person, I'm going to harm you, or I'm going to do. So we encounter this story so many times in our work, and it made me think, what if even faith leaders, the society where we live, what if everyone understood that human rights don't need to be divided? When you understand that human rights have to move together. When one right is affected, then other rights are also going to be affected. You may think that, okay, when we get this person out of our compound, us, the good people who are not queer, when we get this person out of our compound, we are going to have peace, our children are going to be safe. But what if that means more scrutiny? So it's going to affect your privacy. What if it's going to affect your children? Maybe these children were dealing with this person very freely and they didn't have any problem. What if it's going to affect the way they view the world after that? So maybe we need to understand all the facets of human rights in a way that that people understand, that society also appreciates, that when we take away one right, it is going to affect other rights. And maybe it's not only the rights of the one person whose rights have been taken, but also the rights of the rest of us. And I also realized that faith leaders are very influential people. Many times, like she noticed, many people do things simply because the religious leaders say. So I think faith leaders have to recognize their role in society and in shaping our understanding of people. I don't know. I think faith leaders need to just appreciate the fact that their role in society is very critical, and especially in our East African society, and that human rights starts from where we are. People don't necessarily talk about human rights, but they talk about their duties. And when people understand that their duties also include respecting the rights of other people, and that respecting the rights of other people maybe will also ensure that their rights are protected, maybe people will understand that, and we could create a common ground around that, simply rights and duties.
What makes it so hard that when you go to a community to preach and say, you know, we are all love, we are all good, what is most difficult? And why do I ask? I ask because I think you also have a burden in the communities where you are to make it believable to them, because they've been told it's not the right thing. So for you as religious leaders, maybe it would be interesting as you respond, what is the biggest challenge to you getting people to respect the humanity of others, especially in the line of this conversation, LGBTI people, cohabiting women, you know, those things on the line of morality?
Personally, I think we as the church, the most difficult part is the mandate. When we are ordained, my colleagues will support me. One of the biggest or the hugest vow we make is to submit to our superiors. And we make a vow to completely submit to our superiors, what they have to say and what they will tell us. And there are no two ways about it. Okay, so I'm now a canon, my brother here is the reverend, but automatically what I say is right. Canon Biamugisha will defend me there. We used to work with him at the bishop's office of Namirembe, by then Bishop Sekati. But his word is final by virtue of the vows we have ourselves have made. So far, they have not given us any leeway to do otherwise or to say otherwise. They've told us, these guys are bad people, be careful. So that is the command, that is the mandate we carry. And you can tell that we are only retired priests these days who are out here. But the rest who are juniors, they are nowhere to be seen and they are around someplace. But we are here, me and my brother and Bishop Senyonyo. Abe here hasn't yet retired, but very soon he will join us. Those are the few religious people who can stand up. Because for us, we are now sure nobody can destroy our careers. They were all in a safe place. But those who are starting afresh, we know that it is our vow to submit to our bishops. And then our bishops know too well that it is their vow to submit to their archbishops. So until we can uproot such a mandate right from the canons themselves, the laws of the church, until we can uproot that bit from the canons, there is no way about it. To me, that is my humble submission.
I would like to build on what my brother said. When it comes to matters of faith, we have what we call the dogmas. Those are unquestionable matters which you need not talk about. And when you look at the churches we represent, for instance, look at myself who represents, actually I'm here as an Orthodox, but it might not be the position of the Orthodox Church that we must participate or engage in these conversations. Because already the canons are very clear and the stand of the church is very clear. And it is the reason why we are finding it difficult to engage in interfaith conversations. When we get an opportunity of meeting with others, we meet as individuals because we fear to hurt the stand of the church. So we find ourselves in a very tough position on how we can change such. Other than doing that, we turn to be radical and take our own stand as individuals, but not for the church. If you remember some time back, our brother, Father Musar Anthony, wrote a document, and that document caused him problems with his bishop. He was put on Katebe for some good time, not until he had to surrender and agree that he's going to become obedient to his bishop. And the church has ways on how he can discipline. They can call you and say, you remain here, close to your bishop, and you will never say anything. They can just bring you, or they take you to Vatican and they say, be there. If it is the Russian Orthodox Church, go to Moscow and be there. Now where will you make your career from? They will just squeeze you like that. and that one will silence us.
The moment all of us collectively speak, I don't know if that's the case here, but as a country, as young people and other people in Kenya, we've been able to bring our president to Twitter, X, to address us. We've gone on the streets. Of course, it didn't come at no cost. Lives were lost to protest against things that we did not like, or that the government was doing. So when it comes to how to use the voice, social media campaigns, again, we've seen what happens on protests. Even people who go online, people are abducted. They're state-sponsored abductions, amongst other things. But they can't kill all of us. You know, they can't abduct all of us. The moment all of us speak about these issues, then we are stronger together. There's a poem by Martin Niemöller I really resonate with, and he says, first they came for the socialists. I did not speak up because I wasn't a socialist. And then they came for the trade unionists. I did not speak up because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews. I did not speak up because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and no one was left to speak for me. So what happens when we do not speak now, and they keep coming for you? You think it doesn't come to you. When all of us are gone, who will speak for you? Thank you.